أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين بالقاسم محمد وأهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Welcome to Tuesday night program of Tawassul. Inshallah, before I start, a couple of announcements regarding some of the events that are coming up. Inshallah, this Shabbat Jummah, we will have a regular Shabbat Jummah program starting at 7:30 with Hadith Kisad Dua Kumail, followed by speech by our guest speaker, Maulana Sayyid Samir Ali. Inshallah, will be joining us for this speech on Thursday night. Please attend the program on time. Saturday, before I go to Saturday, Friday, we have a seniors program at Masjid-e-Ali, which is in conjunction with the, this will be the second program that we have started for the senior members of our community. Inshallah, it'll be right after Salatul Jum'ah at 2 p.m. Inshallah, this week's seniors program, along with the luncheon, they will be provided, inshallah. We will show how to prepare an Islamic will and the method, and inshallah will provide materials to write an Islamic will. And then on Saturday will be 25th of Dhul Qada, which marks the day which is called Dahwul Ard. In the past, we've had the Amal conducted, but this year we will not be having the Amal done in Masjid, but the link to the Amal was sent that you can perform on the day of 25th of Dhul Qada, which will be this coming Saturday, June 25th. Inshallah, with that, we will start with Dua Tawassul. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم إني أسألك وأتوجه إليك بنبيك نبي الرحمة محمد صلى الله عليه وآله يا أبا القاسم يا رسول الله يا إمام الرحمة يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله يا أبا الحسن يا أمير المؤمنين يا علي بن أبي طالب يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله يا فاطمة الزهراء يا بنت محمد يا قرة عين الرسول يا سيدتنا ومولاتنا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيهة عند الله اشفعي لنا عند الله يا أبا الحسن يا أبا محمد يا حسن بن علي أيها المجتبى يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله يا أبا عبد الله يا حسين بن علي أيها الشهيد يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله يا أبا الحسن يا علي بن الحسين يا زين العابدين يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله يا أبا جعفر يا محمد بن علي أيها الباقر يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله يا أبا عبد الله يا جعفر بن محمد أيها الصادق يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله يا أبا الحسن يا موسى بن جعفر أيها الكاظم يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله يا أبا الحسن يا علي يا ابن موسى أيها الرضا يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله يا أبا جعفر يا محمد بن علي أيها التقي الجواد يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله يا أبا الحسن يا علي بن محمد أيها الهادي النقي ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله يا أبا محمد يا حسن بن علي أيها الزكي العسكري ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله يا وصي الحسن والخلف الحجة أيها القائم المنتظر المهدي يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله. Ask for your hajat from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Dua. يا سادتي وموالي إني توجهت بكم أئمتي وعدتي ليوم فقري وحاجتي إلى الله وتوسلت بكم إلى الله واستشفعت بكم إلى الله فاشفعوا لي عند الله واستنقذوني من ذنوبي عند الله فإنكم وسيلتي إلى الله وبحبكم وبقربكم أرجو نجاة من الله فكونوا عند الله رجائي يا سادتي يا أولياء الله صلى الله عليهم أجمعين ولعن الله أعداء الله ظالميهم من الأولين والآخرين آمين رب العالمين. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. لأرواح المؤمنين والمؤمنات فاتحة. خصوصي فاتحة is requested for مرحومة سيد رباب بانو جعفري بنت السيد بندي حسن جعفري. It's her 15th birthday. Please remember her in your du'as and your Surah Fatiha, as well as all the marhumin of mu'minin and mu'minat. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Let us also remember all of those people who are in need of dua, those who are suffering, struggling, going through difficult time. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bring them out of their difficulties, provide them with complete shafa, inshallah. Let's remember them by reciting this ayat from Surah Namal together 5 times. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. أَمَّا يُجِيبُ الْمُضْطَرَّ إِذَا دَعَاهُ وَيَكْشِفُ السُّوءَ أما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء 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 ويجعلكم خلفاء الأرض أإله مع الله قليلا ما تذكرون. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين بالقاسم محمد وأهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا. أما بعد، فقد قال الله تبارك وتعالى وقوله الحق وهو أصدق القائلين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والسماء ذات البروج واليوم الموعود وشاهد ومشهود قتل أصحاب الأخدود. صدق الله العلي العظيم. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. The surah that I recited, or the verses from the surah which I recited, is Surah Buruj. Inshallah, as we've been doing in these Tuesday night programs, giving a very holistic tafsir of these the surahs from the 30th juz of Quran. And the purpose behind these tafsir is not to go in details of each and every single ayat, as we normally do in our Ramadan tafsir program. But here the objective was to give you an overall summary of the entire chapter, through which, inshallah, you'll be able to understand next time you come across this surah, when you read through the surah, the perks and the importance and the features of it, and what is being said, what is being discussed. The entire chapter as a summary of it is, inshallah, something which we have been endeavoring to perform. With that said, we started with some of the chapters from outside of the 30th juz, and then we started with Surah Naba, and this is the 5th chapter in the, or the 7th chapter rather, in the order that we've been doing. So the first few ayat that I recited, Tabarrukan, I'll translate that it begins by a set of oaths taken by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So whenever you see the word wa in the beginning of these ayat, this waw is wawul qasam, meaning that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is taking an oath, is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is swearing by these things. For example, wal fajr, wal layl, wal subh, wal nahar, and wat teen, wal zaytun, wal shams, wal qamar, and so on and so forth. Here, it begins by saying, was sama'i dhatil buruj, by the sky, dhatil buruj, not just any sky, sky and the heaven with its stars or houses. Now, inshallah, we'll get into the tafsir of that. By the heaven with its houses, depends how person has translated or mufassir has looked at. Then the next ayah says, wal yawmil maw'ud, and by the promised day, which of course refers to the day of judgment. Wa shahidin wa mashhud, by the witness and the witnessed. So shahid is the one who witnesses, mashhud is that which is being witnessed. Qutila ashabul ukhdud, perish the people of the ditch. Ashabul ukhdud, the fire abounding in fuel. So these are the first 4 or 5 ayat that I had recited for you. The word buruj is the name of the chapter. It is plural for burj, which means a matter which is obvious and apparent, meaning nothing ambiguous about it, nothing hidden about it. When people talk, Urdu mein jisko hum kinaya kehte hain, metaphorically, they don't use straightforward words. That's where ambiguity is. But something which is clear, which is obvious, which is apparent, and there's nothing hidden, it's called buruj. And from this madda, you have tabarruj as well, which goes into bab tafa'ul, which means to reveal one's beauty or ornaments, as in that ayat referring to the wives of Rasulullah, Ya nisa an-nabi lastunna ka'ahadin min an-nisa'i. And then fast forward to the ayat which says وَقَرْنَ فِي بُيُوتِكُنَّ وَلَا تَبَرَّجْنَ تَبَرُّجَ الْجَاهِلِيَّةِ الْأُولَى. Remain in your houses and do not flaunt your beautification to, وَلَا تَبَرَّجْنَ تَبَرُّجَ الْجَاهِلِيَّةِ الْأُولَى, the way you used to do in the times of ignorance. Meaning that's what the custom was in the time of Jahiliyyah, that they would walk around with revealing their beauty and ornaments and decoration and whatever. This is something that Islam is now stopping them from doing so. The tall buildings are also called burj. So in the recent past, there are some Burj Khalifa and Burj this and Burj that. In the Arab world, you will see these tall buildings are named Burj something. The tall buildings are also called burj, which is the singular for buruj, because they're visible from far distance, because you can see them, because they're high rises. They're not covered by the hills or the trees, or they're apparent to you. They're visible from far distance. So when you can see the skyline of a city, the tall high rises, they're also called burj. In these verses, the word buruj refers to the stars that shine in the sky. وَالسَّمَاءِ ذَاتِ الْبُرُوجِ, because of their revealing and obvious nature. These stars are not hiding anything. Some are bright, some are not as bright. But nonetheless, you can spot them on a dark night. You're able to see them at nighttime. So they're called buruj. And the reference to this is at another place in Quran. Allah says, وَلَقَدْ جَعَلْنَا فِي السَّمَاءِ بُرُوجًا وَزَيَّنَّاهَا لِلنَّاظِرِينَ. That indeed we have placed in the sky these stars, and we have decorated them, زَيَّنَّاهَا لِلنَّاظِرِينَ, for those who witness them. In the next ayat, you had the word shahidin wa mashhud. Shahid, which is who's the witness. So you say, produce some shahidin, produce some shuhada, and those who can bear witness. Shawahid are the proofs. So the word shahid and mashhud, there are about 30 different possibilities for these two words. I mean, that's how broad the spectrum is. Meaning shahid is Allah, mashhud is everything other than Allah. So swear by the creator and that which is created. And then some other things are also mentioned as far as shahid and mashhud are concerned. Of course, as I said, where our methodology here on Tuesday night programs is to keep it very limited, and I won't go in the depth of the ayat of Quran. Rather, it will be just a holistic approach, delivering a summary of these surahs. So as I said, there are 30 different possibilities of shahid and mashhud, which many of the mufassirin have mentioned in their books. Our second Imam, Imam Hassan al-Mushtaba alayhi salatu wasalam, he gave one of the possibilities. He says shahid means the zat of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Prophet Muhammad is shahid because of the ayat of Quran, inna arsalnaka shahidan wa mubashiran wa nadhiran. Indeed, we sent you as a shahid, as a witness. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala calls Rasulullah to be shahid, and thus the word, Imam Hassan says, refers to Rasulullah. And the word mashhud, he says, means qayamat. And then he quotes another ayat of Quran, dalika yawmun majmu'un lahun nasu wa dalika yawmun mashhud, the day for which the people will be collected. Dalika yawmun majmu'un lahun nasu. And that is the day which will be witnessed. Surah Hud 103, referring to the day of judgment. Moving forward, the word wuqud is the fuel for which is used to burn the fire. As another ayat of Quran, very ethical and akhlaqi and eye-opening, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, if my memory can serve me, do not become the qu anfusakum wa ahlikum protect yourself and your family from the fire. The fuel of this fire is the people, meaning fire requires fuel so that it can burn. Sometimes once the fire has been ignited, all it requires is, material that it burns. That's why when fire starts burning in forests, it just burns through the wood and burns acres and acres of land, because it's continuously being provided for. Now that's why people start, fire department would start putting out the fire, contain it, stop it. But as long as there's fuel, or as long as there's something to burn, the fire will continue to burn. There's a very, fadaili hadith in this reference as well. I have recited it before in some of the majalis, that the Prophet of Islam, Hazrat Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, Ya Ali hubbuka, Ali, your love is like, or the one who loves you, the love of Ali burns the sins. Inshallah, I'll remember the actual words of hadith. The love of Ali burns the sins the way fire burns the wood. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is giving this analogy, comparing Amir al-Mu'mineen, Imam al-Muttaqin, Ali ibn Abi Talib, and his love, in a sense that the love of Ali ibn Abi Talib can be that aspect of, how fire burns through the wood. Let's see if I can pull this hadith. No, I can't. I don't know. Inshallah, if I find it, I'll share this hadith with you. So if you have the love of Ali, the summary of it is, the gist of it is that if you have the love of Ali ibn Abi Talib, the sins cannot settle in this heart. The heart, which has the love of Ali, burns the sins away, just like the fire burns the wood away. So that's the beauty of love of Amir al-Mu'mineen. Anyways, the word wuqud is the fuel for which is used to burn fire. Ukhdud means deep pit, or a ditch, or a trench, if you want to call it. Ashabul Ukhdud were the people who dug that deep trench or a pit. They built a fire and they threw the believers in it. An overview of the surah is a warning about harming other people in general and believers specifically. History of the companions of Ukhdud and the people of Thamud and Fir'aun. Quran's place, in the protected tablets, Lawh and Mahfuz. That is one of the discussions. The name is derived from the very first ayah, which is was-sama'i dhatil buruj, the heavens or the sky, which is decked with these stars. Not just any sky or not just any heaven, but the one that has these shining buruj in it. There are 22 verses in this chapter, 109 words, 458 letters and alphabets. What are the objectives and the lessons that we can derive from this chapter? The real objective, of course, of Surah Buruj is to strengthen the morale, the spirit of the believers against the persecution of the opposition. And of course, the warning from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So if you were to divide the contents and look at the topics that are mentioned in the surah, although Surah Buruj is a Makki chapter, but we can assess from the main objectives is to strengthen the morale of mu'mineen against the opposition, which is true for both Makkah and Medina. Because in Makkah, initially, when Muslims are embracing Islam, there's a lot of opposition and they're being persecuted. And so it makes sense. But similar is the case when they migrate to Medina. There's a lot of persecution. There are a lot of wars in the form of wars that take place. And that also requires, that mu'mineen show their steadfastness, and it's sort of like history repeating itself. So in this regard, the story of the companions of Ukhdud is related. That those who dug the trenches, kindled huge fires therein, threatening the believers with fire, burned many alive. But of course, the mu'mineen, they remain steadfast as far as their faith is concerned. Another part of the surah, it talks about the kuffar who oppress the believers. God threatens them about the wrath of the scorching fire in Jahannam, while giving believers good news of the gardens of bliss. In the next part of the surah, it takes them back to history. It takes them back in the history and depicts the story of Fir'aun, story of Thamud, and the strong, arrogant tribes before their eyes, how they knelt and bowed, and then they perished before the divine punishment. Of course, they remain arrogant, but they had no choice but to kneel in front of the divine punishment. This is to inform the kuffar of Makkah, who had very little power compared to those previous nations, that they should consider their actions. This also served as a means of solace for the Prophet of Islam, Hazrat Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and it also served as solace to the followers of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam as well. In the last section of the surah, he points to the greatness of the Holy Quran, the extraordinary importance, and concludes the surah with that. Features and some of the khawas and the specifics and the reward of reciting the surah is a hadith from Yunus ibn Dhabiyan, who narrates from our sixth Imam, Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq alayhi salatu wassalam, who said, whoever recites Surah Buruj, which is the surah of the prophets, in their wajib prayers, Allah will raise them with the prophets on the day of judgment and keep them in the company of the prophets. So two benefits: being in the company of the prophet, and number two, being raised with the prophet. Place of revelation, of course, we mentioned the surah was revealed in Makkah between the period of Hijrat to Habsha, the first migration of the Muslims led by Ja'far al-Tayyar toward Abyssinia, the Christian king over there, and then Prophet's ascension to Mi'raj, right, the paradise. So between these two incidents, you have where the surah was revealed. It was revealed after Surah Shams. It is 85th chapter in the current order of the surahs in the Quran, and it is 27th in the chronological order of revelation. In this surah, Allah takes an oath by various different things. He takes the oath by the sky or the heaven, by the day of judgment, by Shahid and Mashhud, then relates the story of a group of people who were burned, of course, due to their steadfastness for their belief in Tawheed. This was used as a reference, although it tells us that most likely the believers were also living in similar situation at that time in Makkah. Allah gives them solace by reminding them that you're not alone in this. Rather, others have suffered due to their iman as well, and you will also have to go through and show some patience, but nonetheless, with this patience, victory will be yours. So this is basically just a brief gist of chapter number 85 from the Holy Quran, known as Surah Buruj. Now regarding that hadith which I was referring to, inshallah, if I can find it, bear with me for 1 second. Okay. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam related this hadith regarding the fadilat of Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib. He said, Hubbu Ali ya'kulu sayyi'at كما تأكل النار الحطب. Or حب علي يأكل الذنوب كما تأكل النار الحطب. That love of Ali burns away the sins and the lapses the same way the fire burns through the wood if it's thrown into it. Another thing that you can derive from this is that as long as the fire is lit, it continues to burn. Meaning what? No matter how many woods you throw into it, it'll just burn it away. Similarly, if the one who has love of Ali encounters situation where there's an invitation to haram and sinning, as long as the love of Ali is encompassing, overpowering, this person will remain away from sinning. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to fill our hearts with the love of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salatu wassalam. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to hasten the reappearance of our awaited Imam, make us amongst the helpers and the soldiers of Imam. Wa akhiru da'wana and alhamdulillah rabbil alameen. Wa sallallahu Muhammad wa ala Muhammad mutawajjih ziyarat. Assalamu alaikum ya Rasulullah, assalamu alaikum ya Nabi Allah, assalamu alaikum ya Habib Allah, assalamu alaikum ya Khiratullah, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. السلام عليك يا غريب الغرباء، السلام عليك يا معين الضعفاء والفقراء، السلام عليك يا شمس الشموس وأنيس النفوس، أيها المدفون بعرض توسلي ابن موسى رضا ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك صاحب العصر والزمان، السلام عليك إمام الإنس والجان، السلام عليك شريك القرآن، أجل الله تعالى فرجك وسهل الله مخرجك وظهورك وجعلنا من أعوانك وأنصارك ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.